Welcome back, guys. It's Byron Phillips from ByronPhillipsMedia.com. Thank you for watching the intro. Literally the last couple of nights, well, a few nights ago, I decided that I was going to do a nighttime shoot, and this is just a simple concept of me doing some typing on the keyboard. But what I really wanted to find out is how much light I had to give to a scene in order to simulate a nighttime scene, because the G7 isn't a fantastic low light camera, so it was all about understanding the equipment that I've got and exactly how much I had to light in order to make this convincing. Now, I didn't want this to be a single scene shot, so that's why we started with the wide, and then we have a subsequent few shots then around the computer itself. So there was two aspects that I needed to tackle with when it came to the actual lighting of the scene. So we had the initial issue of how much light do we need to give the wide shot and exactly where to position the lights so that they don't fall within the scene and you can't see them. And then with the subsequent three shots, then we had a bit more control over that because they were tighter shots and you had a bit more liberty as to where you put the lights or where you wanted the lights to go. So we'll start off with the wide shot because that's where the beginning of the night began. Anyway, but that's where we'll start with. So we had a blanket room, so everything was turned off. Now, I know that with this camera, I have 3 stops of latitude above base exposure before things start to clip. But I don't really know how much latitude I have under it before things become a mushy mess in the actual shadows. So on the night I took a chance of saying, right, okay, the maximum I can go is 8 stops under in order to replicate a light scene, because I didn't want there to be a mass amount of detail, but I wanted to see shapes in the background. So for instance, the sofa, the TV, so that the viewer could get a general sense of what was in the room, so that it gives context as to why, when we are pushing in with the actual shot, where we are, what we're doing and why we're there. So you don't really think about it, you just go, it's in the living room, it's night time, boom, without the computer. Simple. So we had to get the base exposure of that room up. So I decided I was gonna go for 8 stops under, and I had to work out which light was the limiting factor. And unfortunately, I tried my main key light, which is the Fort R150, and this was too powerful. Even at 10%, when I turned this off, this completely flooded the room, and I needed that to be much more dim, and it wasn't, so I had to abandon using that. So that was one thing. So then I used some fluorescent tubes that I bought online, which are, I think, the T5 tubes, and they allow me to put them in varying positions, and they've been working out great. So I thought I'd try that to produce some hard shadows, because the first thing I wanted to find out is how to cast the Venetian blinds against the wall. I couldn't do it with the light outside because it was raining. And I know that in quite a few of the videos that I've said is that I can't get the main key light outside because I'm on a balcony, not on a balcony, but I'm in a flat. And I can't get the light out there to actually shine through the window. And then the other day I was in the kitchen and I was looking out and I was going, I've got a balcony. I could put a key light out there. And I tested it and it bloody worked. And I was just like, I could have done this so long ago. But since then, being the UK, it has absolutely rained all the time. So I just can't do it. I just can't get the key light. So that's why the light was back in the living room, trying to cast that shadow. And for love nor money, because I couldn't get the right look that I wanted. And I was in the middle of moving the dining room chairs. And as I moved one of the dining room chairs past the light, lo and behold, Venetian blinds being cast against the wall, against the slats, and I was just like, well, this will fucking work, pardon my language, well, this will work. So that's what I done. So I stacked 2 chairs, and then the light was then being shone through the actual chairs. Now the reason why they're up and they're off the floor is that we have a TV the other side of the room, and that is reflecting all the light that is in. So if you can see the light within the TV, you're going to know that that room was lit, so that's why everything had been raised up. Now the second light, now I'll go back to this light. Now the issue with that light is that it can't be dimmed. So I wanted that light to be 6 stops under my base exposure. So originally I was going to go for 2.2 on the lens, but this was coming in quite bright, and it was just ruining the effect of it being a nighttime. It looked lit. So in order for that light to be 6 stops under, I had to set the lens at f4, and that is what I shot the rest of the footage at then for the rest of the night, to keep consistency, because it's important. If you're going to start with an aperture in a room or a scene, stick to it. It helps with the consistency of the image that you're seeing. If you're throwing in too many different apertures in a single room, it can really throw off, and it can really take out of the experience that you're looking at. So that is why I stuck with f4. 1, because it controlled the main light, and 2, it was right for what I wanted. Now I could have used an ND filter, but I didn't. And the reason being is that because I didn't want everything to have a complete shallow depth of field, I wanted you to see a bit of detail within the room so that you got a general sense of where we are. So that worked out perfect, but it was counterintuitive to my mind, because usually when you talk about a night scene, everybody says you should have it at the widest aperture, like an f1.4, and you've got to get the ISO as much as you can, and that's not actually, in certain situations that's true, but I'm waffling on now. So anyway, that was that sorted. The next then was using another LED panel by the YN300. Again, I won't pronounce the name because I'm always shit with it. And I had that then placed on the table, and that was being diffused, and then that was providing the ambient light then for the rest of the room. So obviously the main window light was coming in at 6 stops under, so this light had to be under that again, because you don't want this, the ambient room light, to be brighter than the light that's coming outside. When you simulate in night, it would just look daft. So I made sure that that was 8 stops under f4, so that was another 2 stops under the main light itself, which was the window. And I think the power setting was on, I think 13 or 16, but it was really quite low, and because it's a small light, it provided the enough ambience in the room to lift everything up, so you could see the detail, or so much the shapes of the fact that it is a sofa, it's a TV. Now at the time the lights weren't turned on at the TV, so, but you can tell that anyway, but that's what I was going for. Now the other light then was sitting behind the door, and this is a Godox R1, and this was providing just enough light off my face. Now even though the monitor light was providing enough light, you had to get pretty close to get the right exposure. So as the camera was coming around the door, the light that you see in, which I think was either half stop or a stop under f4, which is I think was coming in at f3 or something, but that was off the Godox R1, and that was being set at 8000 Kelvin for a blue light. Now the camera settings that I used for this was obviously use f4 on the lens. It was 4000 Kelvin on the actual white balance, and the reason for this is that the tube lights were 4000. They are a warm white. Now I didn't want to go for the overall blue image, because sometimes it, the moon's reflective, it's not blue, it's just that we use blue a lot to simulate the look of the night, but I didn't want to go for that. Unfortunately, the YN is 5600, so by setting that to 4000, obviously I'm still gonna get some of that blue cast in the light, which is fine, but I'll explain how I control the white balance for the computer screen later on, and that was done in DaVinci Resolve. So that is essentially the wide shot setup. Now the only thing that I did do, now the YN is obviously on the table, and that is being diffused, and a couple of days ago I wanted to make diffusion that wasn't flat. So basically I was doing a daytime scene, and one of the things I was trying to replicate was the natural fall off using one light around the room. And what I was noticing is where the window is, you get a nice dark just by the corner of the window. It's nice and dark, and then it gradually gets better, lighter. And one of the challenges I was finding with using a single light was controlling that and it not being quite so linear. So with a normal diffusion, it's quite square and you get a flat fall off. But what I wanted was a nice curved. So what I went and done is I created, well, I didn't create, but I got some PVC piping. I've got some cable, and then I run the cable through the PVC piping, and using two calipers, I then pulled this tight together so that it formed an arc. And on that then I put the diffusion on, so that one key light now is being cast all around the room. And what I've done is that on the side closest to me where I was sitting, I put some negative black duvetine on that one side. So on the left side, we get a nice fill that is naturally arcing around the room. And then where I'm sitting in the wide shot, you've got the actual black duvetine. Now that changed, that didn't change, that stayed there. But what that did was that when I was facing the computer, you had the natural light, the light coming in from the actual window of the wall. So you've got the light there. Then you had the contrast at the back of my head, which was providing a nice dark contrast. And then on my face, then you had the light that was coming from the R1. So it was just being peppered with, I've been watching the one in DP, peppered with the little bits of light. So you got splashes of dark light going through the image, and that's what I was trying to achieve. So that was essentially the wide shot, and that set the tone for the image. Now when we come in closer using the V flat board that I've got now, that was actually positioned right behind where I sat, and the position of the light for the actual R1 didn't change. So what that was doing is providing a bit more contrast on the back side of my head, and I did increase that light a little bit more so that it was a bit, not so much more intense, but you could see a lot more of the features of my face, which is not great for you guys. Now the one thing that I did do, I didn't want this to be a flat image, so where the light was coming in. So what I did was I shifted that light to the left of the monitor. You couldn't see it within the actual frame, but you can see on the lens itself where you're getting a little bit of a light leak. That's because of the R1 light, and it's positioned just at the corner. So what that's doing is rather than hitting the front of my face, it's actually coming in at a 45-degree angle, and that's why we're getting a bit of contrast on the fill side of my face. Even though the monitor is providing a little bit of fill, it's not wrapping around my face completely, and that's why we're seeing a bit of the contrast between the key light and the main light. The next part then was the actual keyboard and behind me. So we'll tackle the keyboard first. So the keyboard, the original R1 light, now that was on a little mini selfie stick, like a tripod, and that was just a little bit above the monitor pointed down. Now because where the keyboard was, you could see all of that. That was taken off, and where I usually got my shelves, I clamped that to the side and then I angled that down, because what I wanted was a nice fall off. So you had the light which was being shone on my arm because it was coming down from this way, and then we had the fill side here. So with the camera coming in at this side, we had the nice light coming in over the arm, and then we had contrast within that frame. So we were maintaining that interest. So it's all about sticking to the rules. Well, I must say sticking to the rules, but you've got a bit more input. When I say input, creativity to move stuff when you're closer in to make the shot look better. Now had I left the light straight above, that you would have lost a lot of the contrast on the arms and where the shadows would have been. It would have landed falling flat, and I didn't want that. So that's why the light was moved to a 45-degree angle, shone down, and it was clamped to the side. So that then was providing the lighting for that shot. And obviously the V flag hadn't moved, that was still right behind me, providing that negative contrast behind the body. The next shot then is obviously behind my head. The R1 was removed because we didn't need that light anymore, because the light that was coming off the monitor doesn't need to light my face up for the detail, because we wanted to make sure there was still the contrast behind the back of my head, and we wanted just a nice kind of rim light going around the face and in front of the arms. So it's all upstage lighting. So the light was upstage, we're shooting into the shadow, and then we've just got enough light for you to understand what's going on. And that is pretty much it. So there were literally only 3 lights. So I say 3 lights, you got things like the practicals, like the monitor, the TV was on. I was going to put a candle in, but with the way the angles were, you wouldn't have seen it anyway, so it wasn't worth it. And yeah, it turned out to be a good night, so I'm really pleased. Now I have had to use noise reduction, and in DaVinci Resolve I'm using the free version, or the free way of doing that, which is by using it in Fusion and applying it there. I apply it directly to the layer above the actual video. Any text effects then, or anything above, usually go above that. And then obviously we had the monitor, so the white balance of the monitor. Now obviously I had the camera set at 4000, which turns everything which is like a natural white into a bit of a blue, depending on what the light source is kicking out. And I don't know what obviously the Kelvin is of the monitor, but I know that viewing it through the camera, that was coming in at a bit of a blue. So what I did was in DaVinci, for that one scene only, whereby you are positioned by the monitor in the RGB, well I say the RGB, but in the curves on the highlights, what I did was I selected the blue channel and I dropped this down to meet where the green was, because it was quite above where green was. I didn't get to match it, I can't remember where red was, but I dropped that down, and that just fetched back enough whiteness in that one scene for it not to look blue, because I did this a while back and I had a bit of trouble with the TV, and that's where the colors were a bit off in the nighttime scene on that one, was because I shot it at 4000 or 3200 and you had that bit of a shitter basically. So those are the things that you need to be very mindful of, and this is something I'm learning all the time. If you're going for a nighttime scene and you've got something on the computer whereby you are typing a document, if you want that to be white, then you've obviously got to take the blue out of the highlights for that one shot. But just remember that it's only one shot and it might only be a couple of seconds. So my voice is starting to go now and we're going to pack up. So thank you for joining me. I hope that was beneficial. I'm trying to keep them shorter, so fingers crossed you've enjoyed, and yeah, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.